Good evening, everyone. We're happy to have you here tonight. My name is Flo Berry. I am with the development team at Tampa Museum of Art. Welcome, everyone. I will be behind the scenes this evening, monitoring the Q&A and the chat. And now I would like to invite our Penny and Jeff Vinnick Executive Director, Michael Tomor, to join us. And I hope you enjoy.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Flo. I'm Michael Tomar, the Penny and Jeff Vinnick Executive Director of the Tampa Museum of Art, and we are delighted to have you join us this evening for the virtual preview opening of HerStory, Stories of Ancient Heroines and Everyday Women from the collection of the Tampa Museum of Art, generously sponsored by Fifth Third Bank. And I too would like to welcome all of our guests of Fifth Third Bank, as well as our members, Directors Circle, curators, platinum and gold level patrons, our highest level donors, Tampa Collects members, and Art Plus members and our Board of Trustees and Foundation Directors. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. Let me also send a message of thanks and gratitude to the co-curators of this exhibition you'll learn more about tonight. Tampa Museum of Art Education Curator, Brittany Bevel, and Community Engagement Manager, Cassandra Abel. As well, let me thank contemporary and modern art curator Joanna Rabotham and the collections management and preparatory staff. Together, they made a formidable team to help us all gain insight into this stunning collection and exhibition. So, I'm sure you're asking, how did this program come to be? Well, our education team became fluent in the stories told through the museum's ancient Greek and Roman collection by sharing them with students and visitors of all ages who come to the museum through our Connections program for those living with mental health challenges, through our Art Space program for those geographically displaced due to homelessness, immigration, and domestic abuse, and through our school tour programs. So I talked with our education team to ask if they might like to tell the story of women in antiquity in honor of the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote and the suffragette movement, which also coincides with the Tampa Museum of Art's 100th anniversary in this year, 2020. And they jumped at the opportunity, and we're thrilled with the results. The Antiquities collection at the museum, a cornerstone of the permanent collection, originated with a purchase from the Joseph Veach Noble's private collection with funds from the community, from the city of Tampa, the Hillsborough County, and the state of Florida in the mid-1980s. These partnerships with the private and public sector to bring to the community opportunities to experience original works of art with stories of cultures and civilizations ancient to us now are important because they allow us to fund the opportunity to discuss the foundations of ancient civilizations and America today. These partnerships, much as the one we share tonight with Fifth Third Bank, are developed for you, members of our museum, as well as citizens across the region, the state, and international communities. So I thank you all again for your support of the museum at this very important moment in our history and our present day, as told through HerStory. And equally important, I'd like to thank two families who are not here with us. The Perry and the Lemonopoulos families left generous endowments to the museum to ensure antiquity programs such as those we're sharing with you tonight will remain a constant at our museum for generations to come. 2020 is a very exciting year for the museum as we celebrate its centennial anniversary. For 100 years, a consistently supportive arts community has contributed to the museum's growth and success. And this year has been unprecedented in the history of the museum, and perhaps arguably across the world. But on a more regional perspective, we opened our 2020 centennial celebration with the publication of a beautiful book telling the stories of our history in Tampa. Our history book also features 100 of the museum's most significant works of art that best reflect its focus on building a collection of close to 8,000 works. Some of those works you'll see tonight. The book highlights our extensive collection of Etruscan and ancient Greek and Roman art, as well as modern and contemporary works on paper, sculptures, and paintings from the 19th through the 21st centuries. Well, what was also unprecedented was the voluntary closing of our museum on March 16th to work with our community to slow the spread of COVID-19. And since then, the museum launched Museum from Home, a new active menu of virtual programs and art activities found on our website, tampamuseum.org, a direction we're eager to continue moving forward. But even our virtual programming could not take the place of accessing and experiencing original works of art in person. The great news tonight is that while we reopened to the public on June 1st for our community to enjoy original works of art, we are also still mindful of our community's need for caution. And even with our modified protocols of social distancing, required masks, and capacity limits at the museum, we know many would prefer to experience our programs from afar. So tonight, we bring to you another first, our first virtual opening and exhibition preview. But don't forget, the museum is open, again, 362 days a year, Monday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., with extended evening hours on Thursdays until 8. We miss seeing you, maybe as much as you miss experiencing the art in person. So when you return to see this exhibition in person, and we hope you will soon, you'll be able to enjoy 7 other different remarkable exhibitions, shop in our store, eat in our cafe, and take in the beautiful scenic views of our terraces of Hillsborough River and Curtis Hickson Park. Really, there's nothing quite like that experience or the experience you'll have with such an outstanding exhibition, HerStory, part of one of North America's great collections of ancient art, and certainly the most celebrated ancient art collection in the Southeastern United States. Thank you again to Fifth Third Bank for your sponsorship of the exhibition, and thank you all for attending this evening. With that, let me welcome Frank Bonzak, Vice President, Wealth Management Advisor at Fifth Third Private Bank.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for allowing Fifth Third to be a part of this inspirational event in your evening tonight. My name is Frank Bonzak. I'm a Wealth Management Advisor for Fifth Third Bank in Tampa Bay. I'm also a proud member of the Tampa Museum of Art Board of Directors, the Foundation Board of Directors, and the Education and Legacy Committees for the museum. I'm very excited about the HerStory exhibit tonight, as Michael noted, it being the first virtual exhibition opening for the museum in its history. I want to thank my colleagues and our Fifth Third clients who are joining us by Zoom. I want to recognize the Tampa Museum of Art patrons and members for your contributions in helping make Tampa a cultural destination. I was born and raised in Tampa. We've come a long, long way, as has the museum. I also want to extend a thank you to Brittany, Cassandra, Barbara Stubbs, our Education Committee Chair, and the entire education team for their efforts daily to educate our children and the adults in this community. I also want to take a moment, Michael mentioned them, to remember my very dear friend, Mary Perry, who we lost in 2018. Mary was a current day heroine for me, for the arts. She exemplified passion, grace, kindness, and tenacity. With Mary and Dr. Perry's joy of antiquities and the story that each of these pieces tell, they would be very, very happy to see how this exhibition evolves and what we're going to see tonight. Fifth Third has been in the business of building communities for 162 years. We have a very long-standing support for the museum, and we're proud to partner with each of you in our journey to build this thriving arts community. Please feel free to send me a message through the chat function if you have any questions about how Fifth Third and we can help you achieve success into the future. Thank you all again for your participation this evening, for allowing me to be a part of your evening. I'll now turn it back over to Michael and the curators for the exhibition presentation. Thank you all so much for being here.
Frank, thank you so much. I'm so excited about tonight. This is actually my first virtual opening reception also. So I'm thrilled to turn it over to my more capable team than I and introduce to you Joanna Rabotham, our curator of modern and contemporary art and the moderator of our discussion this evening. So I will now turn it over to Joanna, and thank you all for being here with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Michael, for the wonderful introduction. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Bonzak and Fifth Third Bank for their generous sponsorship of HerStory. this evening. We are so thrilled to finally be able to share this show with our patrons and our audience. This has been in the making for quite a long time, and I couldn't be more proud of Brittany and Cassandra for the work that they've done on this exhibition. Before we delve into our program, I do want to give a shout out to our small but mighty curatorial team. I know I do this at the front end of every conversation, every talk that we have, but this is really just a spectacular team that we have in the curatorial department. I can't do these shows all on my own, and with a prep team of 3, our registrar and a department assistant, we get these shows up on the wall for your enjoyment. And this has been a particularly interesting time to install. We have installed 6 galleries over a period of about 6 to 8 weeks, which is pretty amazing for our team. We don't usually do as many rotations, but given the unusual circumstances that we're in right now, we have just been working nonstop. Tonight we open HerStory. This is the last of the shows that we have installed. And for those of you who have been with us for the past couple of weeks, I know some of you tonight have already participated or watched or listened to our past conversations on the Frank Stella shows, Frank Stella What You See, and Frank Stella Illustrations after Elzitsky's Hot Gaya from the collection of BNY Mellon. Those exhibitions opened in June. Followed by, following those openings, we opened a really beautiful installation on our Sullivan Terrace titled Air Fermère, Dominique Labouvie, an artist working regionally here who's in our collection, and I'm sure most of you in the audience are quite familiar with his work. We're really pleased to see this work outdoors. It's really, really wonderful. And then we recently opened, and I hope you all have a chance to come in and see this, this gem of a show, Sketches and Sculptures, a Study of C. Paul Genuine. I think we opened this show up about 3 weeks ago. And this was a show that I can't wait to tell you more about in a future program. Michael had specifically asked me to organize a show from our vast genuine archive of 2,600 objects. Some of the works on view will be old favorites, such as Greek dance that you see on the screen here, and the maquettes for the Philadelphia Museum of Art pediment in the background, but most of the works on paper have never been seen before. So please do, if you have a chance to come by the museum, come by and see this exhibition. Otherwise, we will look forward to welcoming you to a virtual program in the near future. In preparing for HerStory, we also freshened up the classical world. So here is a new graphic designed by one of our staff, Phil Ledoux, who has been working really closely with us on the graphic identity for our exhibitions, and really pleased to see some of the work that he's done in the classical world. So with that, I would like to introduce my dear and brilliant colleagues, Cassandra Abel and Brittany Bevel, who I've just had a really wonderful time working with them on this exhibition. Tonight, I will be asking them a series of questions, and they will give you some background content on how they organize the exhibition, several of the works in the show, and then lastly, we will talk about some of our favorite works in the collection. For those of you who have not met Cassandra and Brittany, let me introduce them properly to you this evening. Cassandra Abel serves as the Community Engagement Manager at the Tampa Museum of Art. In this role, she co-heads the Education Division with Brittany Bevel and oversees the studio and team programs, as well as our outreach for the museum. Ms. Abel received her Master of Letters in Fine Arts and Decorative Art at Christie's Education and the University of Glasgow. She holds her BA in Art History from the University of South Florida. And a fun fact, which I learned just yesterday, is that her area of interest is Baroque art. That's correct, right, Cassandra? Nod your head. Brittany Bevel is the Education Curator here at TMA, and she has served in this role since 2015. As the Education Curator, she manages 3 docent training programs, oversees tour programs, and assists with the coordination of school and public programs. Prior to coming to TMA, Brittany served as the museum school coordinator at the El Paso Museum of Art. She holds her Master of Arts and Design Education. She holds a Master of Arts in Art and Design Education with a focus on museum education from the Rhode Island School of Design and a BA in Art History from Northern Arizona University. So welcome. Thank you, Brittany and Cassandra, for organizing this brilliant show. As everybody knows, antiquities is not my area of specialty. And so I was really grateful that they stepped in and were able to organize the show, contextualize, and teach me just an abundance of information about this collection. So, good evening, Brittany and Cassandra. Let's just start it off really quickly. What was it like for you to, as you know, working on the education side, our roles are, you know, quite different, curatorial and education, but we come together and work collaboratively and work quite closely together. But what was it like for the two of you to really come behind the curtain and take on a curatorial role?
It was enlightening. We as educators thrive on our audiences. We get feedback from our audiences. We are really focused on what they're interested in, and we stuff our heads full of knowledge so that we have just the right fact to share with any school child or adult visitor who might be in our galleries or in one of our programs. But to work in this mode where we were focused on the research, we had to write our own labels and figure out what was the most important information was definitely a new experience. And we are very appreciative of the entire curatorial team and the hand-holding they did with us for the entire process of this project.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of hand-holding. You know, we've always appreciated our curatorial team. They are just the best around, and kind of seeing the other side of that curtain has made us appreciate them even more. It was absolutely fascinating to kind of see all those little steps that go into making the exhibition. We, you know, we're kind of nebulously aware of them before, but actually experiencing them, that has been very enlightening. And I would have to agree with Brittany. It is a completely different standpoint when we're used to taking amazing curatorial visions and kind of soaking that up and then being a conduit for the visitors to experience that in our programs. And now we had to come up with a vision, which is so much fun, but at the same time, you know, educators are mouthy people. We like to talk, we like to go on, and it was so much fun to really narrow that down and come up with a story that has been like really nuanced, and we really, it was a lot of fun.
Well, tell us about how you organized it. Everything from the different sections to the exhibition to the title of the show.
Yeah, so the concept of the show really started in two places, and that's directly reflected in the title. My first step was to go to the gallery and document every single object in our collection that featured a woman. And then from there, narrow it down and figure out how things fit together. But we really started with two big ideas: the mythology, the goddesses and the heroines, versus the everyday woman. And those two things led us to the larger scope of the exhibition itself. So the title of HerStory, I think, started as a joke within our department. Cassandra, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But we really liked that this exhibition is telling her story, and so much of history has been about his story. So we wanted to really focus in on the women and what we can learn about them from the pieces in our collection. So ultimately, the show is divided into 4 sections. You have those 2 bigger ones kind of leveled out into 4 smaller ones. So the first part of the exhibition focuses on cultural influence and the way that the ancient world has really influenced contemporary art. And we see that in 2 places in this exhibition. You see that with Patricia Cronin's Aphrodite Reimagined, as well as her painting of our torso of Aphrodite. And then you have a case and a section that looks at the Amazons and the influence of the Amazons on Wonder Woman. So this section really is focused on how contemporary artists are still inspired by the ancient world.
And then we have a section related to the goddesses. So the a big chunk of those two are dedicated to Aphrodite, as well as Athena. We also have a couple objects that feature one or two goddesses on there. So we all know the most popular kind of information that we have about women in the ancient world is related to the myths, the goddesses, the those superhuman heroines that are featured in those myths. So that is that section kind of takes some time and looks at those objects and a little bit more about those myths. And the next section we have is a section on remembrance. This is really interesting because a lot of what we know about the ancient world in general has to do with what was left behind in tombs and grave sites, what was left behind to commemorate individuals. So this section it goes into that a little bit. We have two objects that actually reference real women, one Etruscan and one Egyptian. So we were able to kind of gather and tell a little bit about the story of not only how women were remembered, but also women's role in the remembrance of others.
And of course, all of these sections overlap a little, and we spent a long time debating about which object should go in which case. One of those is in this final section, focusing on representations of the lives women led, as well as objects women used, is the case that features the processions and women's role in ceremonies. Those were often religious and therefore related to the goddesses. In our case about women in sports, we still feature two goddesses and a mythological heroine. But then we also have cases that feature women's roles in the home or outside of the home, as well as objects actually used, worn by women. So we can learn a lot from their lives in that way.
So what is so interesting to me about this exhibition is that you have pulled objects that are familiar to us, that are things that have been on view in both of the galleries, Lemanopolis and McKechnie Gallery. But we also, I know you pulled some objects from stores that have not been out for quite a while. Could you maybe tell us about, did the show and organizing it and researching it, did a new favorite pop out to you, or did it just kind of reinforce works in the collection that you already love?
So for me, it definitely reinforced my my love for Athena in general, but this piece right here, actually I started at the museum as a docent way back in the day, and at that time there was this wonderful program where docents would select an object and do additional research with Seth, the curator at the time, and present to the fellow docents. And this is the object that I selected because I was completely fascinated with it, probably because I love Athena, and just researching this object a little bit more, as well as how it relates to this exhibition and women. It's made me discover a whole new facet to this object and love it even more.
Great.
For me, I remember as my adolescent teenage self having a small book that featured 3 myths from Greek mythology, all based on women. And one of those stories was the heroine Atalanta. So the minute I realized, because this is a quite small object, and I will say I tend to really enjoy the tiny objects that people easily overlook, because I like telling those stories and people getting excited when they discover something new. But when I discovered that this tiny object actually features Atalanta and Peleus, I became super fascinated with it. Atalanta is a heroine who suffered the worst curse imaginable when she was born. She was born a girl. So to a king, that is a terrible, terrible situation. He ordered his daughter to be killed because he wanted a son. The person who was supposed to kill Atalanta actually abandoned her in the woods, and she was raised by a she-bear. During her time in the woods, she became a really strong athlete as well as a huntress. And she was so good that Jason invited her to join his Argonauts. And it was there that she met Peleus, who is a renowned wrestler, so renowned that he wrestled the goddess Thetis and won her as his wife. But Atalanta actually won her wrestling match against Peleus, and that's what this handle is. You see the two figures, Peleus and Atalanta, in kind of a buddy pose. Other versions of this, you might find them in the actual act of wrestling. But I really like the idea of a mortal woman so powerful, she could defeat a man who could defeat a goddess.
And if I'm looking at these correctly, these are both in the same case, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, they are both related to sports. And that, of course, when you think about Atalanta and her wrestling, as well as the pseudo-Panathenaic amphora, would have been a prize awarded to individuals who won during the Panathenaic Games, which were games related to the festival of the Panathenaea, a celebration of the goddess Athena held in Athens every 4 years. And on the back, which we don't have an image for you, but it features a horse race. And one of the reasons why I love this piece is that the actual amphora that this is based off of, the prize amphoras, if it had a horse on it, a horse race, it may have gone to a woman, because while women couldn't necessarily participate in athletics during the Panathenaic Games, they could own a horse. And if that horse won in either a chariot race or a horse riding race, it wasn't the driver that got the prize, it was the owner of the horse. So this is one time when a woman could take home a prize during these festivals. So that was really fascinating and very fun for me.
It's also interesting. There's one work in particular that we have highlighted just a little bit more and kind of blown up the image so you can see what's actually illustrated on it, and that is the white brown illustrated on it, right? And that is the white brown lecathos.
To the best of our knowledge.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a fluke. I heard a little bit of feedback or echoing on my audio, so I'm hoping that we're okay. So tell us about this oil vessel that is seeming, it's quite unique, and I know that the two of you have such a unique, fresh perspective. So tell us what this is and why we highlighted this.
So this particular object is often talked about on our tours and with our groups because it has a false bottom in it. So the oil itself, it can probably only hold about this much. We've x-rayed it to find out how much it can hold. But because the object itself, it's maybe about a foot tall, it makes it seem like it's such a grand gesture. That part of it is super fascinating to our audiences, but we are looking at it, and here you see the image of the object as well as the blow up as it is in the galleries. There are two figures on it, and they are showing you exactly what this object was used for. So the woman on the right is holding this white ground lecathos in her hand and is about to present it at a grave altar. You can of dirt behind the altar itself. And so, like many of the vases in our collection, this one is telling us what it was used for with the image that's on it, and helps us understand some of the roles women might have played in the act of remembering deceased loved ones.
And I should point out also, when we're planning exhibitions, I don't know how much, when I give the kind of behind the scenes talks about it, we spend a lot of time actually kind of talking about the shows with Michael, and he gives us some really wonderful feedback. And this was in particular one of them where he said, why don't you, sometimes it's really difficult for us to see the imagery on the objects. So let's blow up one or two and highlight it in the gallery. And this was a really great choice. This is, I think, now one of my new favorite pieces in the exhibition. So speaking about new favorites, we know about pieces that you have long loved. Tell us about some new works that emerged for you.
Well, my new favorite was, it's a little general, but the epitaph has been, oh, I'm sorry about that feedback. The epitaphs have been so enlightening to me. In doing research for this, I went and did a lot of time focusing on what was written about women after they've passed. So the words that are etched either on tombs or in our two examples um, on actual objects, a sarcophagus and a cinerarium. And these two just absolutely fascinated me because they are a snapshot of two women who lived so very long ago. And they're both kind of printed large in the galleries. One tells a story of a woman, Claudia, who, you know, you can kind of get a glimpse of her life. She experienced the grief of having to bury one of her children, but you can see that, you know, she was so loved by her family. And also a little bit about her daily life, that she said, you know, she really took care of the home and she made some wool. So that kind of told you like her role, but how loved and respected she was for that. And then another for Callimachus' daughter, who was the first woman who tended the temple of Nike. So Athena Nike, and in the Parthenon, she was the that temple, and on the Acropolis, sorry, she was the first to be there to take care of it. And that kind of highlights another role of women who were priestesses who would clean the monumental, the sacred statues. She would, when Athena's robe was made for her during the her peplos was made for her during the festival, you know, you could imagine this priestess helping to clothe her in that. So really insightful, and I kind of felt a little bit more connected with those women as I was doing the research with these epitaphs. Kind of makes you think about, you know, what's going to be said about you after, and you know, if what is said about you kind of add some insight to your life, to someone for, you know, 2,000 years from now.
Sorry about that. Like Cassandra, I went from a mythological story based object to a real woman that I'm really fascinated by. My fascination with this object started with the Institute for Digital Explorations at USF. They've 3D imaged some of our objects, and they were kind enough to print this one in 3D so we can use it with our groups as a touch object and really explore all the facets of this sculptural head. But in putting together this exhibition and doing some more research on her, it's really fascinating to learn about the women whose names have survived throughout history. So Arsinoe II was a Ptolemaic queen in Egypt, so a Greek queen in Egypt. She was married to her brother, but the two of them, there are writings that survive that describe both of their roles within the ruling of Egypt. And she was so revered by her husband and her son that they actually had her deified. And she's a many greats grandmother of the famous Cleopatra. And so there's a lot of interesting stories in that family that is really nice to see a actual woman and her story from history survive.
Wonderful. And now, Cassandra, can you tell us a little bit about Aphrodite? Because we have, say we, I mean, collectively, we not only have the kind of the smaller, more you know, ancient versions of Aphrodite, but we have the biggest probably thing that people will notice is that we moved Aphrodite Reimagined back, moved her indoors, which she had been living outdoors for a long time, but the curatorial team decided for the care and conservation of her, we wanted to pull her inside for the safe being. So tell us about this section. This is a really fascinating section of the exhibition.
Oh, so I got a chance to learn a little bit more about Aphrodite and love her a little bit more for it. So I think Aphrodite is, most well known for being the goddess of love and beauty. She was the goddess who kind of started the Trojan War, right? Because, she promised the most beautiful woman to Paris, and he took that opportunity to get Helen of Troy on his arm. So that's what we know of Aphrodite. But in really looking at these objects in our collection, you realize how multifaceted she was as a goddess, and how all these different cultures really kind of revered her in lots of different ways. So we find out that in Greece, she was also called upon to protect travelers who were traveling by sea. Of course, this makes sense because she was born of the sea. So she had lots and lots of temples along the seaside. Then, you have in Rome, you have her as, this god, the goddess mother type figure. So very maternal type of goddess who is, the mother of Rome. And then you have their rulers kind of tracing their lineage back to Aphrodite. So that's really fascinating there. And then art historically, you have the central, if you see the tallest, the highest, tiniest little object, you see this clothed Aphrodite, which looks a little odd in our eyes. But then you realize that most Aphrodites before about the 4th century BC were clothed because, all the goddesses were clothed. Women were not presented, the nude female was not this idealized beauty as was the nude male figure until Praxiteles decided to make this nude Aphrodite to place in her temples. So that her role in kind of creating this whole new artistic style, the female nude, bringing the female nude into art is also fascinating. So she's something, that Aphrodite, and I think if people spend a little bit more time researching her and learning more about her, you realize that she's not just about all love and beauty. There's a lot to her.
Speaking of love and beauty, one of the, I think, most fascinating cases in the exhibition is the case dedicated to jewelry and adornment. And some of the things in here that you shared with me and have been telling me about over the past couple of weeks are just kind of mind-blowing to me. So tell our audience what is going on and what objects we see here.
Yeah, so most of the staff members that I've been in the gallery with have expressed a similar comment, Joanna, that this is one of their favorite cases in the exhibit, but it features objects that would have been used by or worn by women. And I love the Etruscan mirror. It's something that a woman would have used every day to view her reflection in her appearance. But we also have Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, is often associated with adornment. So jewelry often reflects Aphrodite. So the 2 earrings and the necklace both feature little mini cupids, or Eros, who is the son of Aphrodite, god of love. And the mirror itself features a follower of Tuiran, the Etruscan goddess of love. So we have these jewelry pieces, these utilitarian pieces that are still looking back to Aphrodite. The other objects in this case include belt plaques that women might have worn, bracelets that are so big and heavy they're likely only used for ceremonial or burial purposes. And then my favorite new thing is these fibulae. A fibula is what our contemporary safety pin is based on, but these are the pins that would have been used to hold a woman's clothing closed. And those are the convention that the Greeks and Romans and Etruscans created in these objects are still the conventions we use with our safety pins today. So this tiny one in particular has a little coil on it, and you can see the pin resting in its bed just like a safety pin. So it's really fun to think about how their clothing might have worked and how conventions they used are things we still use today.
I love that. And even just about, what is it, about a week ago, we realized we didn't have a lot of material or research on those two gold pieces in the collection, those teeny tiny earrings that are, you know, when we see them on our database and on the checklist, they look like they're, you know, 3 or 4 inches, but they're so, so tiny and delicate. And the same with the necklace. So it was really wonderful that, you know, your other colleagues in the education department were able to contribute to that research. Could you tell us a little bit about what Victoria found in regards to gold in ancient times?
Yeah, so these objects, and Victoria Pagel, our tour and education programs coordinator, is the person we tasked with doing some of this research. But what she found was that these are 4th century BC objects, but they have pretty vague dates. And 4th century was a pretty big century for gold. This is when Alexander the Great is going out into Persia and other lands and building the Greek Empire. And it was at this time that the demand for gold went up, but also the availability of gold. The more lands they conquered, the more gold they had available to use. And so there's still some ambiguity with these pieces. Where do they fall on that timeline? Before Alexander the Great makes these conquests that allow gold to be more available, or after, where gold is very readily available? But they definitely were a status symbol. So gold was and still is a precious metal.
So it's so fascinating. So we're continuing to build our files every time that we research and look at these objects. It just gives us a wonderful opportunity to add to that scholarship for us internally and use for exhibitions. And one thing that I think was really kind of eye-opening for me, transitioning from looking at the everyday woman and some of the adornment, some of the objects worn, when you were explaining about the some of the inspirations her costume. This case is really wonderful. Can you kind of describe what is going on and how this fits into the rest of the exhibition?
So, Cassandra, I'm going to switch the order that we were planning on talking about this. So Wonder Woman has recently become a major hit thanks to the revitalization of her character through the new Justice League movies that have been created, Wonder Woman in particular, and the sequel comes out in October. If you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it. Not only is Wonder Woman the first female comic hero, but this Wonder Woman movie was also directed by a woman, and so there's a lot of sensitivity to the role of women taken in this particular movie. And what we really enjoy about Wonder Woman is she's a descendant of the Amazons. So I'm going to let Cassandra go into more detail about the Amazons themselves, but Wonder Woman grew up on the island of the Themyscira, where the Amazons lived in an all-female society, and she was trained there, but through circumstances she was exposed to the modern world and realized that humanity was something worth fighting for and something she had never seen before, but through the experience in the movie, it's World War I, she is determined to fight for humans and fight for humans' rights. And so the creator of Wonder Woman, William Moulton Marston, created Wonder Woman in 1941. He grew up in the culture of the suffragette movement. His wife was a suffragette, and he believed that our world would not know peace until women had equal rights. And so he created his Wonder Woman character to fight for peace, justice, and women's rights. And so it was really fun to be able to bring that narrative into the story of the Amazons that we talk about frequently in our galleries, but to really delve into how those Amazons continue to inspire contemporary culture.
Yeah, so we have 3 objects on view which present the Amazonians. Each of the objects presents their battle with Heracles or Hercules. The Amazons in mythology were, as Wonder Woman's tribe, they were a tribe of warrior women who could battle amongst and fight amongst the best of the heroes in the ancient world. So they were often in mythology. If you are a hero that needs to show your mettle, you had to kind of go through the Amazons to gain that hero status. And on our vases, it depicts Hercules on his 9th labor is sent to retrieve the belt of Hippolyta. Hippolyta was the daughter of the god of war. So he gifted her with this belt, and the king thought, his daughter wanted it, and it was going to be impossible for Hercules to go get it from the queen of the Amazons. In that story, of course, it's a myth, so there are many different versions that are kind of drastically varied. And some Hercules kind of goes in all guns blazing with his warriors, knowing that they are, a formidable tribe of women. So they really had to go in hard to try and get that belt from her. And after a long battle, he defeats her to claim the belt. In other versions of the myth, the Hippolyta acknowledges the brilliance of Hercules and gifts him the belt. And then it was not, then Hera, who is, Hercules' stepmom, who's not a fan of Hercules at all, didn't like how easy he had it. So through trickery, gets the Amazons to attack Hercules' men. And then the battle ensues. So sorry. So these women were part of a myth of sort of like the anti good Athenian citizen woman, right? They weren't staying home taking care of hearth and home and making wool and retrieving water. They were out there battling, and for some time it was kind of thought that the myth of the Wonder Woman the myth of the Amazons was created to kind of keep the women in their place. However, more recently, we're finding that, the idea that there were women in the ancient world who were formidable warriors was not a myth at all. For the longest time, whenever there was a site that was discovered with remains accompanied by weapons and with injuries of war, it was assumed that they were men. Now, with things like DNA testing, they're realizing that that's not the case. So you have in some parts of Europe, there are these burial sites with women with arrow wounds, with buried with their horses, kind of in a position of riding their horses. And this is a tribe that nomadic groups that would train their women to battle, from a young age, as they would train the men. Because if you're going to go out and fight and all the men go off to war, it's kind of silly to leave your home unprotected. So better leave some really strong women to defend the home. And that's exactly what they did.
And
go ahead.
To Joanna's original question about this idea of costuming and adornment, the original sketch for Wonder Woman's costume in 1941 still survives, and you see on the sketch text between the artist and the creator debating about her costume, and one of their comments they make is, Not sure about her shoes. They kind of look like a stenographer's. Perhaps we can incorporate some sort of Roman contraption. And that Roman contraption that they're talking about are greaves. This pair is a pair of bronze Etruscan greaves from the Met's collection. On one of our small vases featuring Heracles and the Amazons, you can see that her shin guards, more or less, are denoted in a different color to show you the armor. And in the contemporary version, you see that still being represented. So you have the greaves appearing in her legs, you have the overlapping layers of leather in her body armor that was a known Roman practice. And so it's really cool to see how studying history can continue to influence these iconic contemporary figures.
My goodness, you and Cassandra are so knowledgeable about these objects, antiquity, just your passion for this subject matter, for these artworks. They continue to inspire me. You've given me such an entry point into this collection that I literally learn from you every time I walk into the galleries. Before we open it up to questions from our audience, since we are celebrating the Year of the Woman at the museum, I want to kind of go a little bit broader and ask the two of you, what is your favorite work in the Tampa Museum of Art's collection, either by a woman artist or about a woman?
So as I mentioned before during our staff meeting run through, and I've mentioned this to Joanna, this was a really hard decision for me. We have some really fantastic pieces in our collection by women, and I knew what Cassandra's was, so I didn't want to steal hers, but I really do love this painting by Francine Tint. Oftentimes when I pick a favorite to teach from because it resonates really well with an audience. But in thinking about this question, this is one of the pieces I very rarely teach from, because when I stand in front of it, I just want to stand and stare at it. There's something new to discover every time you look at it. There's a rubber band stuck in the paint at least once. I think there might be more than one. But it really just, the colors and the different ways she applied the paint fascinates me, and I want to continue exploring.
And mine is New Galaxy by Alma Thomas. I think there's so many reasons why Alma Thomas as a woman and an artist are so inspiring to me. This is a woman whose family it left the South in the Great Migration to Washington, D.C., who was the first woman to graduate with a fine art degree from Howard, who taught art for 35 years. And it wasn't until, she retired and was able to dedicate her time to making art fully that she really blew up. So you have this amazingly talented woman who had so many brilliantly successful careers, whether it was education or art, and then thrived. I think it was like at 75 or something. And so knowing all that about her, it's inspiring to me. And then the picture itself, the painting itself, is just absolutely beautiful. You stand in front of it, and through her technique, those colors have a way of hovering and shimmering that it's just fantastic. And I'm a little bit of a sci-fi geek myself, so imagining that you're going through a wormhole and these colors and stars are like flashing by you, or you're staring at a new galaxy with the gases and everything. So it's just an absolutely beautiful work of art, and I could stare at it for ages and ages and be happy.
Well, I'm incredibly biased, and I think these are both really terrific picks. I have, as you know, I've shown these works, goodness, I think now in 2 exhibitions in the past year and a half. So I love both of the works that you selected. Thank you so much, Brittany and Cassandra. This has been enlightening, as I expected it to be. And I can't wait to hear about some of the questions from our audience. Congratulations again to the two of you. I can't wait for everybody to see the show. So let's hear from our audience.
So this is your chance, people, to type your questions into that Q&A box. We have two questions and a comment waiting for us. Joanna, I'm going to let you take this first one. How are curatorial decisions easier or more difficult now as opposed to 5 or 10 years ago?
Oh gosh, I would say that they are about the same. I mean, I think decisions, they vary. Like we are making, major decisions, working with Michael, there are big discussions about what type of programming, what type of exhibition is appropriate for that year. Of course, budget is a major concern with all institutions, but I think kind of, at least for me personally, the more I delve into my profession, the decisions become a lot clearer. You find artists, you find artworks, you find themes that just really push you to want to, bring that body of work to your museum. So for us in Tampa, what I love is just we have such a tremendous opportunity to introduce so many wonderful artists to this region, some that are pretty major. For example, we have coming down the pike a retrospective of Prince by Jasper Johns. And we haven't necessarily shown Jasper Johns's work here in Tampa, to showing the next iteration of our Skyway exhibition and really focusing in on the local talent here in the Tampa Bay area. We have some tremendous, really smart artists working here. So some of those decisions, they're just, they're very easy to make. I think the most difficult ones sometimes can be, picking between 1 or 2 works of art. Some of those are kind of more, heart-based decisions, which you kind of wrestle with at night. So I would say I'd say it's about the same. I wouldn't say it's easier or more difficult.
So Cassandra, you're gonna have to help me with this one. Do we have any pieces that include Spartan women or are from Sparta? I want to say off the top of my head, no, or we're not sure.
I would say we're not sure. Our antiquities collection focuses in on Attic, so around Athens, South Italian, some Roman pieces in there, a good amount of Etruscan, so none from Sparta. However, I would like to point out, in doing more research for this, I found out that women played sports, especially there are 2 vases, these South Italian vases that kind of feature a woman holding a bull. In doing more research, we found that Spartan women played this very kind of aggressive game that was sort of like the ancient equivalent to rugby. And in Sparta, that was one of the games that the women played. So it's interesting to kind of look at those pieces and consider what kind of sports, what kind of influence did that Spartan sport have on cultures outside of that region.
And the final comment is not actually a question, it's a comment, but it's really cool, so I wanted to share it out loud. One of our attendees this evening shared with us that the son of the creator of Wonder Woman is Dr. Marston, who lives in Tampa. And as I was saying that, we got one more question. So Joanna, this one is specifically for you. What was it like working with the education team on curating an exhibition? What different perspective did we bring?
Oh my gosh, well, it was fantastic working with our education team. I mean, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, Cassandra and Brittany and I, we possibly work more closely together than perhaps other departments, because there is so much crossover in the work that we do. What was interesting to me is that, again, this isn't my area of specialty. I did not study Greek and Roman art even in school. So for me, the antiquities collection has always been quite challenging for me because it feels so foreign to me. And going through the exhibition, working with them on labels, thinking about the labels that we currently have on the classical world, it just really opened the door for me. And again, I really think that the way that Brittany and Cassandra have how they interpreted the objects, how they wrote their labels, will give not only me, somebody who is, kind of a seasoned museum person, but it will give somebody who is a new museum visitor, someone who is new to this material, just such an eye-opening experience to these objects. Because what's so interesting is that, and I hope this doesn't sound cliche, but the past is not so different from the present. I mean, there's so much that we can relate to, and so many themes in the work that I think are relevant to today's culture. What I think is interesting about the perspective is, that we have different writing styles, and I really, the way that they ask questions is so different from what I do. When I write or when I tell the story in exhibitions, I try to leave enough gaps so viewers can come to their own conclusions. And what I really love about the way that Brittany and Cassandra have approached the show is they come outright and ask you those questions. And so they really are forcing you to have much more of an interactive, kind of engaged experience with the objects. And I think that's quite, phenomenal that they have accomplished that, because these objects are held behind cases, they're behind a plexi, so they can seem seemingly quite distant to you, but they've given the visitor such an entry point into it. It's really fantastic. I can't say enough nice things about them. And I'm not just saying that because I like them personally, but they've done a really fantastic, smart job with this show. And the show, I can see that one of the questions is that the show is running for a nice long time. We hope to have this show up for at least 18 months. So you have quite a while to come into the museum and see it.
I do want to acknowledge we are past our 7:30 mark, so you will not offend us if you need to leave and go take care of something. But as the questions continue to come, I think we're cool with continuing to answer them. And I do, before we end the whole program, I will share the results of our poll at the beginning, asking who your favorite goddess was. But Cassandra or Joanna, I'm gonna let you take a stab at how do you research the provenance of ancient objects?
Oh my gosh, I have to take a pass on that one.
Okay.
I'm a modern and contemporary curator, and I know that researching the provenance of the ancient objects is something that's can take, for some, sometimes it could take months, days, months, years, because there can be such extensive either lack of knowledge or knowledge about the object that the research takes a lot of time. I know that Dr. Pevnik, when he was here working in tandem with the registrar, spent a lot of really thoughtful, diligent time with the objects to make sure that every single object, that we had the right information for our files. And I apologize, my dog literally pulled out the loudest squeaky toy in the bin and is now going to run around the apartment with it. But it's something that, that we take great pride in making sure that our research, especially the provenance research, is thoroughly researched properly and clear and done in all the right kind of legal avenues. I hope that that's a little bit of a general question, but again, because I'm not a specialist in this area, I can't go necessarily too much into detail. But once we have our curator on board, that is something that we could certainly make a topic of discussion for a future program.
And one of our longtime patrons, members, supporters of the museum, Bill Zawadzki, shared with us that Taranto in South Italy was founded in 706 BC by Dorian immigrants hailing from Sparta, and many of our Apulian vases come from there. So while there may not be directly Spartan pieces, there is a relationship to Sparta found in our collection. So thank you, Bill, for your assistance on that one. And we also have a question about what was it like to deinstall and reinstall Aphrodite Reimagined?
That was really quite a, I don't want to say difficult, but it's something that was especially challenging for our registration and prep team. Something not challenging in that it was, needed a lot of fancy equipment or needed a lot of different people helping with it. It's just that it is such a kind of fragile, not necessarily fragile, but a piece that we want to take great care of. And so there were plans, we plan for the deinstall and install weeks in advance and make sure that every single movement from taking her apart, to my understanding, she is constructed of 5 different parts. So the head, the arms, I can't remember what the other ones are.
Her feet.
The feet. So the base of Aphrodite, all of that, every single movement, every single placement is carefully considered, and we talk it through before we actually place it in. We did bring in a specialist who Patricia Cronin recommended that we work with, James Robles, who is based in Orlando, who comes in every time that there is some sort of movement and helps us take her apart, put her back together, fill in and plaster the sculpture. So she looks just as pristine from the first day we installed her out on the balcony, and it looks fresh and new. So it is something that is not an easy feat to do. So my hat's off to the prep team and Sarah Smith, our registrar, for making sure that Aphrodite looks as safe, as beautiful as she did when Patty was here. And we look forward to many more visitors seeing her in a new context.
And we got one question in our chat from Barbara Stubbs, and her question is, how is your presentation of the art different in a virtual context rather than in person? I think we probably all have a slightly different answer to this question, but would somebody like to go first?
I would say that there's a very, when you are with someone in the galleries, there's a very kind of organic, impromptu experience there where it is a kind of a three-way conversation between you, your group, or that person you're talking to, and the exhibition itself. And it's this kind of very physical movement throughout the space, and the proximity of those pieces, and that's very different from this type of presentation. However, what you can do virtually that you can't necessarily do, while you can't do it all in person, is you can show pictures of things, images of things that aren't on view. So you can kind of expand and blow up that conversation a little bit more by presenting some other things. However, I will say that I miss seeing your faces.
Yeah. I say often our greatest asset is the art on our walls. And that's why through all of our programming, we're really focused on making sure everything we do has a connection back to the collection and what's on view. This week, our summer campers are studying ancient art. They're creating mini sarcophagi, and they are decorating vases, and they're creating their own contemporary heroes, looking at the ancient ones as inspiration. So really everything we do goes back to the artwork. And so virtually, we maintain that. Our virtual programs, our virtual tours still look back to what is on view at the museum. But as Cassandra said, it is nice that there's some added extra pieces you can throw in there.
Yeah, I think, what's most challenging again is that we're so used to being in the galleries and interacting with our patrons and our visitors. But, we want to make sure that everybody is staying safe. We want to make sure that we get through this all healthy. And one thing that's really wonderful, and this happened just, a couple moments ago, is I know at our openings, Bill Zawadzki always tells me a fascinating nugget about the Tampa Museum of Art History, or about an object on view, especially in the antiquities. And I am grateful for him to give us that other bit of information about Spartan objects in the collection, because he's been so engaged with the antiquities collection, for decades. We are so grateful for all of his insight and his support and passion for the collection. So thank you, Bill. And hi, Bill. I hope to see you soon sometime.
We have one more question in the chat. How has this research empowered you more in your daily lives as women? And I would say for me, it actually was the act of taking on the role of curator. That I am not confident in my writing. I like to say I became an educator because I hate writing. You can't get away from that as a curator. And so one of the things that I really struggled with, especially, was the intro panel. And one of the things I kind of realized after writing it is I just need to trust my writing and focus on it and go for it and stop second guessing and questioning. So that act of taking on the role of curator has been really empowering.
But though I should point out that when we were talking about it and saying, Brittany, that you were having trouble, thinking about writing the intro text, I said, write it like you're talking to a group. And I think that voice really comes out in both of you and Cassandra's labels. You're writing it like you're talking to us. And I think that's what makes the work really, the objects really come alive. I think for me, again, kind of how it's empowered me is just that notion of thinking that, these are women in ancient times who have, they're using objects in the way that we use them today. And their stories, from the goddesses to the warriors, they are, they're the heartbeat of so much of contemporary culture today. So what I'm looking at in the modern contemporary world was inspired by both these women and what these stories were sharing, thousands of years ago.
I would say there are kind of two ways that this has empowered me a little bit. It has made me kind of trust my own opinion and voice a little bit more. That we had a really good idea and we worked it out. We developed this vision for this show, and it's just been completely empowering to have the backing of Michael and the curatorial team to really push that, and to say that, as educators, we can take a look at our objects and we have an incredibly valid story to tell to the audiences, and we should have gone into that a little bit more confidently and with a louder voice than we did. We got there in the end, but it's taught me to kind of start from there a lot. In another way, it is, we had to dig to find some of these stories about these women. We had to dig pretty far, and we had to piece it together. There's a lot of kind of looking at the objects, what stories the images are telling, how would this have been used, researching the epitaphs and reading so many, and so many of the stories, the epitaphs, what's left behind for women don't even feature their name. It has the name of their husband who's made this marker for them, and not themselves. And these were women that, supported and created through their work and their endeavors at home, created, what we sometimes see as one of the greatest civilizations, this Greek and Roman civilization. So it's really empowered me to kind of speak my own story louder and support other women in speaking their own story louder, because our stories, and as we write them down and mark them down now, future generations shouldn't have to look as hard to find our stories.
Well, with that, I think we should close out our program tonight. Thank you again, Brittany and Cassandra. Thank you to our audience for spending your evening with us. We hope to see you in the galleries again soon. Please stop by and see the show. We really think that it will really open up your eyes, gives these objects a really interesting perspective. So thank you all.
So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.